Our sermon today is going to be a symposium, and we're going to... And this morning includes Alan Fredrickson, Jason Morgan, and I'm Isabel Howe. I have known Alan for about a year, and I have known Jason since he was 13 years old, which is quite a while ago. All three of us have something in common. We're each ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Although we became Jehovah's Witnesses in different congregations at different times, interestingly enough, we all left in 1993. I don't know if there was something going on with the sunspots, but we all left at the same time. Jehovah, by the way, is God's name. It comes from an ancient tetragrammaton that is usually translated Yahweh or Jehovah. And Jehovah's Witnesses are named that because when they go in their door-to-door work, doing the preaching work with the Bible, they are witnessing to Jehovah God. So that's why they call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. On the day Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on my door, I was 39 years old, and I was an atheist who was looking for a religion for my daughter at the time. Their presentation that day, interestingly enough, revolved around some of Albert Einstein's teachings and scriptures from the Bible that coordinated. And their presentation took me from atheism into believing in God again, for which I'm most appreciative. I would like both of you to share your beginnings as Jehovah's Witnesses.
I was born to parents who didn't really go to church. My father was Catholic, my mother was Protestant, and they could never agree, so we didn't go to church. And I wanted to go to church. From the earliest time I can remember, I knew that I was different. I knew that I was gay, even though I didn't have a word for it. And I knew that both of my parents' religions frowned on that. So it was something. So I was always searching for meaning and how could I change myself, how could I live up to what my parents wanted me to be. And I think that's what drove me to start searching for religions. And I had many relatives who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were some of the few people that I respected in the sense that they were the people I knew who actually followed their religion. I knew other people that were Catholic and Protestants. In my little small world, that just happened to be the situation with, I'm not saying it's true, but I didn't know. I grew up with Rick Bertram, by the way. I knew his family, and they didn't follow their teaching, I can tell you that. And so, and it's interesting that he, the side note, would like to impose his religious standards on others when I know for a fact that he and his family don't follow those same standards. But, which led me to start studying with Jehovah's Witnesses when I was about 12 or 13 with my aunt and uncle, and so from that age till about between the age of 23 and 25 is when I left. So when I formed my identity as to who I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we've talked about how that really sticks with you in many ways, unfortunately.
I was actually raised in the church. My dad started studying when I was very young, and he and my mother were divorced, and my mom gave custody of my brother and I to my father because she thought we would have a much better, stable home life with him, which I do believe is true. So I was raised going to witness school, going door to door from the time I was 7 years old all the way until I was 27 years old. So, and I think that's all I have to say for at the moment.
Thank you. Although Jehovah's Witnesses' message is basically a love-based one, because of course it comes from the Bible and is based on Jesus' teachings, they do believe in Jesus, even though they call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses. There are unfortunately many aspects of the religion that are not so loving, and they don't revolve around love. Do either of you care to share any thoughts about that, perhaps personal experiences even?
Sure. With many religions that have a strong control over their followers, whether it's a cult or whether it's a fundamentalist type religion, they do tend to love bomb you. So it seems as though this group is your community, your family, your source of support. And they do, and there's genuine love. And obviously, I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I felt love for my fellow Jehovah's Witnesses. And I know that many of them feel that genuinely, but it's conditional. It's as long as you follow our rules and you do things our way and conform, then you receive our love and our support. If you think for yourself or believe something differently or do something that breaks our rule, it can mean complete shunning. And even if it's your own mother, father, child. So that's, I think, what Isabel means when it doesn't seem very loving, that part of it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, the family. I totally agree with everything that you're saying, Jason. I always remember feeling like we were always encouraged to ask questions and always reason, think. And that was all well and good unless you started coming to conclusions that were different than what was printed in the Watchtower or the Awake or whatever book you were studying. And if you were coming to a different conclusion, then there was something wrong with your thinking. There was something wrong with your faith. You weren't looking for God's interpretation of things. And interestingly, though, the ability to really become founded in your belief, regardless of what everybody, what other the kids in school thought of you, or whatever anybody else in the neighbor thought of you, or what your schoolmate who you go knocking on his door on a Saturday morning thought of you. As long as it was reasonable and true to you, then it didn't matter. And that was great training, because when I finally came to the realization that being gay is okay, that training and that foundation of knowing that if something is reasonable to yourself, then it's true, really fueled my ability to be able to write a letter and disassociate myself. And tying it back to Jason, knowing when I wrote that letter that my family, my entire family, minus my mom who was divorced when I was young and I didn't know very well, and my brother who was kicked out for smoking a couple years before I wrote my letter. My poor dad, his two boys are out of that church. But knowing that when I wrote that letter, my entire life I was walking away from. And it's really interesting. In the last month or so, we've met a few times, and in the last 20 years, I don't think I've ever met another Jehovah's Witness. I mean, I know I met you several years ago, actually. I think I met you for the first time. But having an opportunity to sit and re-engage with that thing that I walked away from so many years ago has really been mind-blowing and soul-blowing in a lot of ways. So, yeah, it's love on the surface, control on the underlevel, for sure.
My most extreme experience with the control was after many times of hearing the same sermon against the young people in the congregation because they weren't doing what they were supposed to. They weren't abiding by 1 Corinthians 15:33, bad associations spoil useful habits. I think it was the fourth time the needs of the congregation, the elders addressed that. And I had talked to them and asked them if perhaps they couldn't do something different to address this. And they didn't. And that was the time I got up and I walked out of the Kingdom Hall and I slammed the door behind me. Now, I don't typically do things like that. So perhaps I had reached a point of no return with things. And of course, there was a mountain of other things at that point. Well, the elders did have me in to talk to me. It was just going to be a nice conversation, they said. I'd never been before the elders before. Well, it was more like a tribunal. And I made the mistake of questioning a few things, the way they had done them, that I thought was inappropriate and that could be handled differently. And this one elder looked at me and he said, "Don't ever question the elders." And he repeated it, "Don't ever question the elders." And for some reason, I had been a Jehovah's Witness for 17 years. I was never really totally aware that that was the case up until that moment, And it was like these people who weren't very well educated, who didn't really have a sense of people's needs, were making these life-changing decisions for them and making these rules and regulations. And here they want to be challenged. Well, then, of course, I got to thinking, well, the governing body at Bethel, at the headquarters, is exactly the same way. It all functions the same way. It's a male-dominated organization, and the governing body can never be challenged. And women, of course, don't have any kind of leadership in the organization. They are kept in their place. If they would say a prayer or do anything to conduct anything in front of a man, they have to put a covering over their head. And gosh, can you think of any other of the controlling
About women?
features? Well, anything. The controlling.
Well, the main thing is this would shock most people, and now looking back, I'm shocked that any educated person could accept this. But one of their teachings, it's in print, is they're against what they call independent thinking. At one point, a friend of ours who also left the same time we did, I was talking to her as we were was really brave of us to even discuss our doubts with each other, because you just didn't, because then that person could go report you, or you'd feel guilty that you were stumbling your brother, and then they'll die at Armageddon thanks to your doubts. So you kept quiet. You didn't want anyone to die because of your inability to have faith. But I was talking to this person named Jill, and I said, but I mean, what about independent thinking? You know, the Watchtower says that we're not supposed to have independent thinking, and she looked at me and said, is there any other kind of thinking? And I thought, yeah, they might as well just say you shouldn't think. And that is the kind of allegiance that you had to have. I just wanted to say that, why would anyone stay in such an organization? How stupid could you be? You know, I could imagine thinking that if you had never been. But one reason, of course, if you were raised in it, you didn't have a choice as a small child, and then your family is there. But why would I, even as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, or why would I? Well, there's satisfaction when you belong to an elite group. When you think you're the only true religion and everybody else in the world is wrong, there's a certain kind of, in this group, and I have the truth. And also there's a security of the routine and of the community. We had 5 meetings a week. In addition to going door to door, I know when I graduated high school, I immediately started going door to door 60 hours a month, and you reported your time. There was no time for doubts. The other thing was, it would take courage to go against, you can't have friends outside the organization. That's bad association. So you cut off ties with your family. We don't celebrate holidays, that's a good thing for them, because then you don't have any reason to get together with your worldly family, because you don't celebrate holidays. So if you're cut off from your family, and you believe they've persecuted you for being a witness, you get this mentality, and then you're cut off from any other support, then this is there's nowhere to go. In fact, witnesses will often say, there's a scripture in the Bible where Jesus said, or somebody said to Jesus, whom will we go away to? And they switched that to, what organization will we go to? So there's nowhere else to go. So that's kind of why you stay.